Welcome, the Conservators Portfolio event. My name is Helena Rodwell. I am a conservator specialising in preventive. I work at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge in the UK. So I am also part of the steering group on the Share Conservation Network, which is also in partnership with the East Anglian Conservators Forum. We're a group in the east of England that we were set up as a network to support conservators and collections care people that are working in this region. And we try to organise things like this, training events, workshops, as well as conferences, but also just networking events to give conservators in the region an opportunity to meet up, especially important for those that are freelance or perhaps the only conservators in their organisation. So it's really just a support network, and we wanted to do something on continuing professional development, and the portfolio seemed like a really good one. And we were looking to host this for not just emerging professionals, but also people who perhaps are looking to change jobs, or because of current circumstances with the pandemic, they may be forced to look for other jobs. And so we were keen to actually collaborate with the ICON Emerging Professionals Network. So I'll just hand over to Rebecca just to say a few words about ICON's EPN.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Helena. And just to echo what you said, really. So I'm on the committee, so the team who organise lots of the events through the ICON Emerging Professionals Network. And we've been running for about 4 or 5 years now. So one of the things that we kind of had to adapt to over the course of the pandemic was providing workshops and resources and things that would benefit people kind of right now, or maybe to overcome some of the difficulties that people have experienced this year. So we're really happy to be hosting this event. We've had a lot of interest in it. So hopefully this is going to be really useful to everybody. So yeah, thanks to Share. I think we'll hand over now to Loredana.
Yeah, just to say, I've just put a couple of links in the chat. One is to the Share Museums network page. So if you are a conservator in the East of England, or you work in the East of England ever, do sign up so you can hear more about the events we hold, but also I'll put a link to the ICON EPN page as well on the ICON website. So please get in touch if you want to. What we'll be doing, I'll just hand over to Loredana, and then if you've got any questions, you can use the Q&A function. So if you hover your mouse over the bottom of your screen, there should be a little Q&A button. And feel free to use the chat as well. And we'll try and field those. So what we'll do is Loredana will speak for about 45 minutes. We'll have a break and we'll pick up any questions in our panel discussion in the second half. You probably have notification it is being recorded. So don't worry if you need to rush off in the middle, you can catch up later. We'll be making this available. We'll be circulating the recording and putting it on the ICON YouTube channel. And also at the end, before I forget, what we'll do is we'll circulate a survey. So certainly for the Conservation Network and for ICON EPN, we're really keen to hear ideas of what you might want from future training and how you think this one went. So please, please, please fill in the survey. It's really helpful. And we'll put a link for that towards the end, and we'll also circulate that. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Loredana, and she has kindly put together this workshop for us. So she completed her postgraduate in conservation studies in 2011, and she has gained professional experience both in private practice and public institutions. She has extensive experience in treatment conservation, but has more recently moved into the preventive side of things. So, and one of the reasons she was keen to do this as well today which we're so glad for, is she's passionate about mentoring young professionals. So I shall hand over.
Hi everyone. Just before I start, can everyone hear me or see me? Can I just have a quick, yeah, Helena or Rebecca, can you just let me know if I'm ready to go?
Yep, we can hear and see you.
Excellent, wonderful. And also before I start, I would just love to say that I've been having one of the worst cold my whole life, so apologies if I disappear to cough or just to breathe, but hopefully should be a little bit better now. So yeah, hi everyone. I can see how many of you are tuning in today, but it would be lovely to, if you can pop in the chat, where are you from, where are you tuning in from? Thank you to come to this workshop to discuss together topics around the conservator portfolio. Before I begin, I want also to express my gratitude for ICON and for Share East, Museum East, for organizing this event, which I hope will be helpful to many today. And I'm very looking forward for the questions at the end, for the conversation with the paneling, with the discussion with the paneling. I really wish something like this would have been available when I also was a conservator student and a young professional, because conservation surely is not a straightforward career, and the path from A to B is not always clear. At least it wasn't to me at the time. So since I emerged, it has always been a vocation to be able to assist those who appear to be passionate and somewhat in need of directions and mentoring. And we all hope that you will do the same after you become a full professional, a conservator. I hope you'll be active in your groups to support other emerging professionals. Just a little bit about my background. Ella did a very lovely, introduced me very well, but just wanted to touch upon a few career stages so that we can all can try to explain where I'm coming from with this workshop. I studied conservation in Italy and became there qualified through the accreditation process, and then decided to move to the UK for an internship at the Victoria and Albert Museum. I stayed there for a bit, but things became very quickly uncertain, and I went back and forth from Italy. It was an insecure phase of my life at the time, because I was still between two countries, so it was very difficult to find something more secure here. But then I was very fortunate to join a private company in the role of decorative art conservator in an assistant role, but very soon I managed to make my way up there and enjoy working on a rich array of objects and collection, facing everyday dilemma and challenges. I became a senior conservator there, and it was a moment of growth in many directions as I became more confident in treating different materials and liaising with different stakeholders. So there was a moment where I was learning more how to treat objects, how to interact with different materials, and then I started improving other different skills. And this is what I want to talk about in this workshop, also acknowledging different stages in a career growth. I've been also subject leader in conservation for the students of the MS in conservation at the Università di Torino. And I moved into As Helena said, I moved into preventive conservation recently, and then I work for the United Kingdom Parliament. In the meantime, I've also been active writing publication, presenting at conferences, supervising students for their placement or internship, organizing workshops on especially on leather conservation. I've been a resident artist for a museum of contemporary art in my native town in Sicily. I'm social media officer for the Icon Gilding and Decorative Surfaces group. I'm a committee member of the Tainan Art Museum in Taiwan and committee advisor for the Leather Conservation Center in Northampton. This is just to show that you can spread your conservation passion into many directions, which will help enriching your expertise as well as your portfolio. So I think this is the very first piece of advice, really. Be engaged with the broad conservation community. So today we'll talk about how to showcase your work to help you moving in your career. A well-organized and eye-catching portfolio can be very crucial for emerging conservation professionals to progress in this field. Today we'll cover the creation and use of a digital and hard copy portfolio in various scenarios in the early career stage, and then for job seeking and graduation student and postgraduate. I will include also information on digital portfolio and general recommendation and organization about the organization of the content. A portfolio is the representation of a person identity as a conservator and as a scholar as well, and is meant to showcase and display your research, your documentation, photographic, and sometimes artistic skill. Portfolio might include conservation treatment reports and other materials such as technical report, research projects, and publication. Like a CV changed during the course of a conservation career, so it does the portfolio to reflect experiences and future goals. When putting together a portfolio, you should always remember that the review might not have a lot of time to review many portfolios on a single day, so they might want to quickly screen through your portfolio. So the information you provide, your portfolio needs to be easy to find and to digest. Portfolio should be clearly structured so that reviewers can absorb the information very quickly or can be able to find section of particular interest. So I suggest to always start with a table of content or a summary that will make different sections easy to find. And this is an example to show a structured mine. Here in this portfolio, obviously the emphasis is on different material types, but of course so it can vary, depends on your strength point, the type of job you're applying for, so the role, the collection you will be working, you want to work for, and so on. And this is a zoom in of part of the table of contents. For each material type, I included eye-catching picture and listed the objects I would then include in the treatment reports of the actual portfolio. I use the wording key object to show that these are only selected project, but you also have the option to include maybe at the end a detailed list of all the objects treated and the projects of research, just a list of everything you've been working on. I think that would be very helpful. I also advise at the very beginning to include a CV or resume in your portfolio. Just to double click on CVs and resume, which you will be anyway asked to provide in the selection process of any job application. So it might be useful to spend a few words on this topic. The main difference between the two is that resumes are shorter, generally 1 or 2 pages, while the CVs can be longer and list experiences more thoroughly, can be up to 4, 5, 6 pages. Usually on an application site will specify which type they would like to receive, and you should always comply to the guidelines, but sometimes there isn't a specification. So in the conservation field, longer version, so the curriculum vitae would be also fine. Here you can see what the main section should be. This is from the American Institute for Conservation. I'm afraid it will be pixeled and you might not see very clearly, but don't worry, because we will share the slides later on, and I do apologize for my Wi-Fi. Here also there are 3 tips for a good resume or CV, but for extension applies to portfolios as well. So include metrics. Having quantifiable achievement is a great way to demonstrate how you will add on to the bottom line and show you would be valuable to the company or institution, depending on what you're applying for. Divide your resume into clear section, because organizing your resume makes it easy to follow, and will help important information to stand out. An error-free resume demonstrates professionalism and attention to detail, and these are 2 strengths that you want to show to the hiring manager. And these also apply for the portfolio. Always get someone, possibly a peer or a supervisor to review your portfolio. That's very important. Written organization of your document is very important. It is very hard to read pages and pages of unclear text. So always choose an easy to read font and the type size, and try to divide the text with headings, subheadings, and so on. You can play really nowadays with formatting the text in a visually appealing way by using underline, bold, capitalizing, number, dots, and so on. Whichever way you decide to organize your content, just make sure you maintain consistency throughout the document. So always use the same fonts, the same colors, the same organization. It is very important to write in clear and concise wording. Reviewers are not looking for poems or creative wording, but for substance. It is important you are able to show how you observe, contextualize, rationalize in your writing. This again is an example of my portfolio, and you can see that the section headings stand out, and the captures are kind of really easy to read as well. Talking about content is very important, of course. You will, especially if it's a conservation portfolio, you will need to add many condition and treatment reports, including treatment report, images, analytical testing, and so on. It is very important that you select treatments that represent your best work, but also be as broad as possible with your selection of materials and treatment skills. include photo documentation, drawings, analytical results, and so on. Remember that the interviewers will look for certain qualities. They want to know how organized you are, how well you express yourself, how you present your work, how you think, how you observe details, as well as how do you make decisions. So for each treatment, make sure you can respond to this question for an eventual interview. Is the background, but even for when you express, when you have a treatment report, try to respond to this question in your treatment report in the portfolio. Is the background research and the context is included? Are the goals and the necessity for the treatment explained? As well as the rationale for the treatment. Or would you, if it's a very old treatment, sometimes it happened to me many times, you would want to, after you have grow your experience as a treatment conservator, you might want to act differently because you have learned about other techniques or other approaches or other materials. So that's absolutely normal. I try to be prepared to justify that. An employee will most likely look for problem-solving skills, especially in conservation, flexibility, so to dealing with the unexpected, and sensitivity to materials, but also to others. So team working is very important. A lot of this would eventually come from an interview, but you can capture this in your portfolio as well. Sorry. Yeah. So when selecting treatments and other projects for your portfolio, choose things that are relevant to the position for which you are applying. Think in terms of what expertise you can offer them. When you choose your treatment, choose what to include, what you're most proud of. Show a vast range of capabilities. Treatment, different type of projects, can be research, can be surveys, can be monitoring, archaeological excavation, and so on. Understand how does it relate to the institution of business if it's a private company, and make sure you do research on them, what type of materials they're specialized in, what type of collection, what their mission is. Think how you can contribute to their mission and not just what they would be able to give you, of course. Adapting your portfolio for your audience can be very important. For example, if you apply for academic institution, non-profit, museums, private practice, try to target the audience. Doing research about the collections will help you to choosing what project to share as well. Investigate about to see the sides of their conservation department, if it's a museum or a private practice, who is working there, what are the background, do some research, and what is actively being conserved at the time. Reports of the museum of the institution will provide information on what they are acquiring, and this might help you to develop your portfolio for that particular when targeting a particular job role. Also, it is important when you choose your treatments to showcase in your portfolio that you know if their work follow the conservation standards, ethical guidance that you can find on ICON or IAC, depending which part of the world you're applying in. And if you have some treatment that are incomplete, it is very important that you are also aware of the ethical issue. I can eventually respond to targeted question on your ethical decision behind a treatment or particular phase of your treatment. You can include specific research projects that you feel are relevant, as well as conference presentations, such as poster, PowerPoint slides. They need to be relevant, and they need to show something you want to display and can justify. Can also consider to include condition surveys, specific guidelines or policies for enclosure, environment or exhibition. Even if the majority of your portfolio may be object treatment report based, don't forget the preventing conservation project, such as surveys, rehousing projects, community outreach, because these are also very important. It is absolutely acceptable to include collaborative projects, but always credit the portion of the project to those who worked on them. Could be photography, a specific analysis, certain aspect of treatment, for instance, if there has been a laser cleaning or something specific. And this shows honesty and ability to work as a party, as part of a team, which is very well regarded. If you have examples of artwork or reconstruction to display hand skills, that you should then include those too. Good images are very important and very explicative, so you should always be mindful when taking pictures and try to use good equipment and follow guidelines. The pictures you use in your portfolio should be adequately labeled, so that the reviewer should not be guessing what are you trying to portray. Visual documentation must always include object identification, measurement scale, color, and grayscale. I would recommend to look at some guidelines, such as the EACF, and I'm sure you can find others. There are so many times, but I don't know how many would be interested. And you can also acquire something such as the photo documentation targets to keep with you with your toolkit wherever you go. That's very important. You can include the catalog number if it's relevant, if the object is part of a collection, but this can also be included in the capture. Remember to label the information clearly. Make sure that when you take pictures that the objects is filling the frame. I really like picture to be taken orthogonally because they're very clear and they will be more objective. If you're lucky, you might be able to take advantage of laboratory equipments and so on. Make sure you always credit the photographer if it's not you. Indicate the treatment phase and date, and include measurement, scale, and color checker. This is just an example to show it's important to take a picture of every side and try to be as clear as possible. And then also for details of the image, make sure you label correctly, accurately. Annotated images can be very relevant, as much as, in fact, as much information can be conveyed through annotated images. You can also include different technique for taking pictures. Magnification, always try to, if you have even very cheap, now they're quite effective dynolights, microscope, USB microscope, they are fantastic and they can picture very important details. This is an example. Of course, need to be near a studio that have these facilities, but this is to show that if you have got this equipment, it will be very important to use. This is same pictures, but taken with different lengths, so they would be in order, in chronological order, reflect visible light, ultraviolet and false color, infrared, and reflected infrared false color. So if you've got, if you are a student or you are in a museum and you have got access to labs or any equipment, make very good use of it. I will keep saying this because it's very important. If you do testing, such as solvent testing or consolidation testing, if you create mock-ups, all the preliminaries to a study that will help justify your treatment or decision-making, those are very important. I think will make the difference from project to project, from applicant to applicant. So I would, even if they just come on paper, which they should, take a picture and put them and justify how you decided to use aqueous at certain pH rather than a solvent. That would be very important. If you have access to certain analysis, FTIR, any other equipment, remember to credit the person of the lab who performed the analysis if it's not you. If it's you, if you did yourself, credit yourself, because it is very important for the reviewer knowing that you are familiar with some techniques. So moving on slightly off topic, I want to talk briefly about digital portfolios. Over the last years, in fact, conservation field are starting embracing new technologies, updating and improving how we approach this field and the conservation and preservation of cultural heritage. Think of the use of laser for cleaning different surfaces from stones to textiles, or the 3D scan to replicate missing parts of sculptures or artworks. The vast use of imaging techniques tied with the not invasive investigation. Sorry. The use of new technologies has also been prevalent in the documentation and presentation of conservation projects, but portfolio have taken a little longer to catch up on this digital revolution. Traditionally, portfolio have been presented in large format. I don't know if you can see this, but yeah, this is my portfolio. It's very huge, it's so heavy to bring. I'll show you later. And before that would be, this is the portfolio of someone, a colleague of me, so they were very beautiful as well, kind of lovely to have this kind of materials, but through this format is still in use and can be the first choice for many professionals in the field. A number of us, conservators, have successfully presented their portfolio in digital format. Digital portfolio offer some good advantages over traditionally printed ones. But the problem for many is that new technologies bring new challenges. When talking about digital portfolio, we tend to associate with maybe a professional website that has been created through online platforms such as Weebly, Squarespace, WordPress, others. But however, we also include non-web-based software such as PDF or PowerPoint. I use InDesign and Photoshop a lot. So these are like all the available options we have. Being able to show high quality pictures, to zoom in on an iPad to a curator, to the job interviewer can be a game changer. You can use iPad to upload large pictures or large section of documentation to create digital portfolio using free apps like iBooks or Dropbox. And you can also print a copy of your portfolios, and they could be always available on your Dropbox on a cloud store, kind of Google Cloud or iCloud and so on. And then you can use those to email or print to provide a print copy to the interviewer. So that's very effective. The American Institute for Conservation, the group, a similar group as this one, so the Emerging Conservation Professional Network, has put some work into this subject, and the next slide will show what they've been discovering. The group has created 2 surveys, one for digital portfolio creators, so for job seekers, and another one for reviewers, supervisors, and so on, gathering a better understanding on how digital portfolio are being used and received by the conservation community. The majority of portfolio creators were in this surveys were graduate students who decided to create digital rather than traditional portfolios, whilst many reviewers evaluate portfolios as part of their hiring process for employees. And the results, of course, will show that on both sides, the respondents prefer digital portfolio formats over traditional ones. The group has also compiled information regarding some of the most important and complicated aspects of the digital portfolio format, including copyright and privacy issues, listing all the advantages and disadvantages of digital versus traditional portfolio, and information about the variety of platform software available to portfolio creators. So that is free and available on their website. Also, I took some screenshots so you can have a preview of this. So this is what they found out. I don't know if you can read from there. I can actually, but on the portfolio creators, 30 people were interviewed, and the 82% would prefer digital portfolios. And the comments are also, I think, very interesting. But as I said, we will give you these slides so you will be able to see yourself. But what is very interesting is, again, is the list of advantages and disadvantages, which are quite intuitive. I need to move to this. So as advantages are ability on traditional portfolio, ability to include a quality image prints, ability to include small experiments or artwork, but I think those can be brought by hand anyway. Privacy issues are easy to control, and that's true. Maybe it's better required by some employers. Of course, you will need to check beforehand what is required, and sometimes application process would demand a digital interview or digital portfolio or selection of it beforehand. So you might need to put together a digital portfolio anyway, and does not require development of additional web design skill. But I don't know what you think. I think developing a skill is always something positive rather than a disadvantages. So online portfolio website, the main advantages are surely a variety of website builders. Now I think they are made much more approachable and ready to read and use. There are free trials. Sometimes they're expensive, of course. There are some costs associated, but there are some that are free. There are free trials and tiers of customization and process, so you can try out for a few weeks before spending any money, and you will need anyway to arrange your pictures and your writing. They offer password protection, so you can have the entire website password protected or only some pages. This website tends to be image heavy, so you might need to make sure you have the permission to put the images on the website, but we'll discuss this in a little while. And one of the main issues are surely the costs associated with this website. You can put nearly an unlimited amount of information on your personal website, constrained only by the file size imposed on the specific plan you selected from your provider. You should also think about your intended audience, who might not have the same technological savvy that you do. Clear tabs, a legible font, and smart navigation through text and images are key. I listed some. My partner is also a tech geek, so I asked him for advice, and I listed what I think are the more approachable and useful in our field. Figma, which is free and is a cloud-based platform. Most of the website you will need to buy the domain, and also it comes with associated costs for hosting. Squarespace is a smart website builder. Even if you select one of the templates, the customization is unlimited. It can be quite at first approach, it can be a little bit overwhelming to use, but it needs some practice and be patient. Wix or Weebly are less customizable, but more approachable, perhaps. Cards, you can choose the template, upload pictures. It's quite easy, and overall is a good value for money. WordPress is free. Webflow is another option. Has got quite eye-catching templates and designs. That's quite good. I always advise on creating a LinkedIn profile, especially to those in the early conservation career, and have a digital portfolio at 10 and ready to share in a cloud-based service rather than creating and maintaining a paid website. And also consider Instagram with the link to your web page could be another way around. Also remember that we were talking about crediting who may take pictures, so the photographer, but for your treatment, but also you need the permission to share images regarding treatments. Working on collection pieces during internship placement, you may not have permission to share these pictures, especially on the website. And you can also have some details on social media, Instagram, but only some, not entire images alone. For the website, before publishing details on treatment, you first need to seek permission of the owner of the pieces, and also need to think about issues related to living artists or pieces that might be on sale in the future. And for instance, if you think about an artwork or a painting that will that has extensive losses, that could really have a negative effect on the value of the piece. So you need to think about it. Sharing portfolio online through website or emails means the treatment reports, images, scientific data are more accessible than on an analogic way. This can be great for sharing information among colleagues, but the fact that this information can be downloaded or printed at any time raises important issues and questions about intellectual property, copyright, fair use, and permissions. So always need to be very mindful about it. We're working for an institution such as museum, treatment reports and photographs created or edited by a conservator are considered work made for hire under the Copyright Act. Therefore, the author of the work is considered to be the employer and not the conservator. Even when not expressly required, requesting permission is always considered. The ICON professional standard and judgment ethics, the last release in 2020, discuss very briefly intellectual property. So I think it's something that needs to be addressed more thoroughly. They acknowledge the need of archiving. As a conservator, you need to archive, while also respecting the confidential nature of certain type of information. That's the information I found on the ICON guidelines. So creating a password for your website and PDF files offer some protection for private content. For instance, Adobe Acrobat has got password protection for the limits download, printing, so on, but are not infallible. So pages that are password protected are not 100% safe. So of course, the electronic portfolio, the main reason is to share work with for potential employment. So it is very important to be able to access the reports. However, this doesn't necessarily require that each report is available directly on your website. Instead, files can be shared via email or downloading service like Dropbox to limit the full circulation of it. I think I'm running out of time. I wanted to briefly touch upon on different career stages and when to start to work on your portfolio and how to keep maintaining it. As we were said before, the portfolio is a presentation of your identity. So at the early stage of your career, your portfolio should be reflecting your academic interests, identity, and your research attitude. Start compiling a portfolio early on, as soon as possible, because it's very important to keep to start the documentation and keep archiving everything very well, and continuously update it as new treatments and opportunities proceed. Starting early and keeping up on maintenance will make it easier to assemble a portfolio whenever the opportunity arises for an interview. I can remember many sleepless nights spent on trying to put together a portfolio last minute. It just takes a lot of time. So I would advise to keep working on it all the time, really. Once you graduate, it's helpful to think about your vision for the future and knowing what kind of job you would want to have will help you shape your experience. So choose classes and internship and so create a useful portfolio for those. When you're a university program, as I was saying before, it's important making the most of the equipments and labs, and also get your classmates to take lots of good quality pictures, especially picture of you working, because we want to see how you keep the bench surrounding you, but also you handle tools and anything. Yeah, I'll move I will be forward now because time is running out and my voice as well. Sorry. Oh, I'm really struggling now, sorry. So when applying for job interviews, you may be asked to provide an online application, letter of interest, CV or resume, and so on. So portfolios are a part of your application, but not the only important requirement you'll be asked to present. So although portfolios can be effective illustration of abilities, focus on portfolio should not lead to neglect the other components. An interview, a portfolio review is usually the very last step in a selection process. So put time and effort in crafting your curriculum vitae and cover letter, personal statement. That's very important too. And this is a screenshot of a part of my folder for previous applications. It's just a part, and this is just to I'm very sorry, to remind you to keep a positive attitude, that when if it happens, I hope won't happen, but if it happens that you're rejected, that you get rejected, it's your application that gets rejected, it's not you. So keep applying, work on improving your skills, ask for feedbacks. It takes time to get used, even at a simple job interview. The more you go through the process of an interview, the more predictable questions will become, the more at ease you will feel during the interviewing process, and you will get very good at it. I hope it will be the first interview you will get the job, but sometimes it takes just a little bit more practice, and yeah, that's my fault. Also, I found very useful to ask colleagues for pre-interviewing me. I found it very useful. If fail an interview, that's totally fine, but please do ask for feedbacks, because it's very important to know what went wrong, what could be improved, and interviewers should be always very reasonably available to give those. So go ahead and ask. These are just a few tips that I found on LinkedIn that are very interesting on how to be successful for your application, and they tell TLC, tender loving care, where just do the research about the company or the museum or the institution. That would be very important, and focus on your transferable skill. How can you meet the institution needs and requirement, and be able to communicate your enthusiasm and your vision for the future. That's also very important. There are a few, just a few words on how to prepare for a job interview. We have been talking about it briefly in the, during the workshop, about when presenting a portfolio in an interview, pre-select the project to discuss and practice discussing the work. Try to be fully aware, knowledgeable about your work, the work you have presented, because you might be asked any type of question, even especially if it will be reviewed in advance of the interview. Try to indicate which projects the reviewers should examine first. Remember that too much information can be overwhelming, so consider removing projects that are not relevant or not contribute to the experiences you want to discuss. Many employers will also expect a presentation or sometimes a practice session, like an assessment in addition or in place of your portfolio. So spend some time to think about how to translate those experiences you capture in a portfolio into a very engaging talk. And you will be asked questions about your work. Sleep well, rest, have nutritious meal, and really get to the interview relaxed rather than stress out. It will pay back. And cue your image, just be appropriate for the role you're applying. Small things, if you're a practical bench conservator, sometimes I had interview people with nails, colored nails, that can, it just can dissolve into them. If you're using solvents that can stain the objects, it can be a very dramatic outcome. So no polish, be very simple, be very smart, and be effective. There are other tips we can discuss, maybe we will do later on, because I'm running late. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to the question later.
So welcome back, everyone. This is the second half of our event about the Conservators portfolio. So just to outline how this part of the event will run, there'll be a mixture of questions from the floor, so our audience, you guys. So please feel free to drop any questions you have either in the chat section or the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and keep track of all those. I've also got some pre-prepared questions that we'll put to the panel as well. So we'll do our best to get through all the questions in a timely manner, but we might end up having to answer some after the event. If you've got any burning questions that you just, can't afford not to ask, then please send them to iconepn@gmail.com, and we'll forward them on to the panelists, and they've kindly agreed to have a look at them after the session. But without further ado, I'm going to get everyone's cameras turned on and mics turned on, and we'll have a short introduction from everyone on the panel, and then we'll get started with it.
I'll jump in. I'm Morgan. I am a conservator at the National Museum of the Royal Navy based in Portsmouth. I was really pleasantly surprised when Loredana shared how many applications she has done. I have a very similar folder and have done lots of different versions of my portfolio, so I hope I have a lot to contribute today.
My name is Diana Davis. I'm head of conservation at the National Museum of the Royal Navy, so I work with Morgan. We have a lot of unusual objects, I guess, mainly the historic ships, aircraft, submarines, so lots of large objects, very varied collection. And we have been building the department here for the last 5 years. So my interest in this is that I've done a lot of interviews and I've seen a lot of portfolios. And hopefully that's of some use to the people here today.
Now I'll go. My name is Annabelle Camp. I am a third-year graduate fellow in the Winterthur University of Delaware program. I specialize in textile conservation. I'm currently located at the Abeck Stiftung in Switzerland. But so I am coming from the student perspective. I was recently making pre-program portfolios to apply to graduate school, and am, constantly updating my graduate school portfolio. So happy to answer any questions for emerging conservators.
I guess it's me. Hi, my name is Sue Maltby, and I'm joining you from Toronto, Canada. I'm an objects conservator in private practice, and I've been so for over 30 years. I actually haven't had a portfolio since I was in school. It doesn't mean that I don't send things to prospective clients, and actually Loredana's talk was fantastic, brava. But anyway, that's me. And I teach preventive conservation too in the Museum Studies program at the University of Toronto.
Oh, thank you very much for introducing yourselves. So I think we actually had a question come up in the chat, so I think I'm going to start with that one first. So this one is about preventive conservation portfolios. How do you make them visually interesting? As preventive conservators, we don't often get asked to bring a portfolio to interview, but I still like to do so. So any tips on preventive conservation?
Well, this is a very good question, and part of the question is like it tells that you are not asked for a portfolio. So I would perhaps, rather than a portfolio, prepare a collection of research of anything related to the project, or spreadsheet. In preventing conservation, we use lots of spreadsheets. So make sure you, in preventing conservation, you are very well organized, and you can have, rather than a visual portfolio, you might want to bring some projects you are particularly proud of, where you might have been working on teams, so you can talk about your role in the team, or you can create just a spreadsheet or just a page of what the project's main issue were, what your role in solving this issue, how you approach these issues, and just make it visually, maybe not with picture, unless sometimes in preventive conservation we have pictures as well of grass or cleaning maintenance project, or if you are just highlight all the main important information. Sometimes people are also, even museums or institutions are interested about time frame, organization skill, communication. So make sure you highlight what skills you developed in a particular project, and that can be done on just on a visually appealing page where you just highlight the main skills, who the people involved in the particular project were, just provide those information in a very well organized way that can be interesting for whoever is going to review your application. So even if there aren't pictures, there are still information that can be resumed and provided to the interviewing panel. So I think it's just trying to work out a good way, a consistent way through the several projects hopefully you will have to showcase.
Okay.
Can I just add? Oh, sorry. Can I just add something to that?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I would say, we're still coordinating here. I would say bring samples of any reports you've written, and the reports that I write are very visual. And if it's a long report, include an executive summary. So, because people don't read a lot, so they can see in a very short period of time what it's all about. Over to you.
Just totally read my mind there. So that's exactly what I was going to say. The other thing is that as long as you can speak to it in a couple of minutes, you can kind of sum it up. That goes a long way. It doesn't really matter what format you're presenting. I actually had somebody present me with a series of books that they'd written, not on conservation subject whatsoever, but it showed all these extra soft skills, and they just said, here, this proves that, you know, I can research and I can write well and I can put this together and I can work to deadlines. And it was a really good example, actually, and it made them stick in my mind as well.
I just wanted to add, I think also just the point of getting people to take photos of you in action can be helpful as well. It can be a bit embarrassing to ask people to do it, but it can be hugely helpful, not just for portfolios, but if you have to write reports for funders or anything like that, those kind of photos are hugely useful.
I'll also just add in the topic of photos, a iPhone or phone tripod can be your best friend if you're working by yourself, or it's a pandemic and you don't want to touch someone else's phone. It's, you know, $20, you can order it online and you always have someone to take your picture. So.
And also, if you're like me and you don't like having your picture taken, take pictures with your hands on things. It makes a difference just to see a little bit of a human being in the picture.
There's some really good points there. Really good. We've got a few questions that have come up in the Q&A. So start with the top one. What features and qualities included in the most outstanding portfolios that you have seen? So what qualities and features have you recognized to be particularly good, and what's caught your attention? And that's to everybody.
Well, for me, the projects that always stand out are the ones where you've done something innovative. When you're interviewing lots of people and over and over again, they do all tend to blur together. So it's difficult if it's just object, 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 object. So if you can center it on the treatment or whatever it is about that project that makes it special. I would definitely spin it that way if you can.
I personally really like when, obviously portfolios are quite stylistic, and I really appreciate when the CV or the resume is done in the same style, because you might be reviewing all the resumes separately from the portfolios, but in your mind is it instantly a link, that's that person that did this, this and this, and it's really helpful.
I would say succinctness and really good communication skills, and appreciating, as Loredana said, understanding your audience and presenting accordingly.
They need to be really quickly accessible too. So if there's a lot of text on there, it's not going to get read. So it's something that you can glance at and get the gist of pretty quickly. Will stick in your head. I would say kind of like big hero images are good too, but I would be careful about using them if it is just a glossy shot of something. You need to know why you're looking at it.
I think that's so key what Loredana was saying earlier about knowing your audience. I mean, if you're looking at a museum in particular, you're applying for a specific museum, they normally have a collections page and it will go through their different collections. So if you're choosing objects which relate to that, it's so much more helpful. I know that for us, because we have so many hazards in our collection, you know, radiation, asbestos, lead, anything like that. So as soon as someone mentions just one hazard that they've worked with, it shows that they've looked at us as a museum, and it always makes us really excited, like, ooh, that's
yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
great. Okay, next question. So this is one that was in our pre-prepared one. So is it appropriate to bring a portfolio at job interviews, even when it's not required?
Yes.
Why not?
You don't have to ask permission to use your portfolio when you're answering questions. It always helps to see images. So yes, definitely, if you've got it, take it.
I agree. It's your presentation, right? And I think you should be interviewing them as much as them you.
And if you can attach it to an application, absolutely attach it to an application, even if they don't ask for it. I was saying to all the panelists earlier that I'm a bit of a portfolio hussy. Like, I would send my portfolio to anyone going. And also, it's so, like, when you're doing an interview, it's so easy to be really nervous, really anxious. Perhaps you've answered a question that you think you've done poorly and you're immediately off your game. Whereas if they've got your portfolio in front of you, they can see your personality, which you might not be showing on that day because you're so nervous. So definitely bring it all the time.
I would also say if you have a digital portfolio, to put the link in your signature or your CV or your cover letter, because that might answer some of the questions they have before an interview already, and there's no harm in promoting yourself.
Great. Yeah, it's all confidence, isn't it? Sort of not being afraid to just attach it. So next question is about showcasing a research project. What's the best way of showcasing a research project? So, for example, like a journal publication.
I think probably you should probably still be able to fit it into the same kind of template that you're using already. Still show the work and then just highlight the link to the article at the bottom of it. You don't necessarily have to present the whole paper, although I've done that as well. Take the paper with you, have it in the back if anybody wants it. But I would say just lay out the work the same way you would with your other projects, and then just make sure you've got it noted there that it's gone to publication.
Yeah, I would suggest the same. It's all about, if you are going for an interview, print them or share the links in your application. They might not want to go through their own reading, but they might be interested in one of the others. So there's nothing more than just show that you have worked on some publication. And sometimes it can be a conference presentation. So you might want to just do a little brief resume, like a abstract, or you can just print the abstract and then maybe some slides that are of particular interest, and again, like treat it as a small publication to provide if you're asked, just to show that you have got it, you have there, and then if the panel or the interviewer is interested, the discussion can deepen and double click on one or more article of publication. But it's always worth to bring this. My super heavy portfolio I showed before, I printed them in my publication that I keep with me all the time. I'm never asked, but they're there just in case, security.
Okay, excellent. So we've got another question. Currently I have 2 portfolios. One is presented in chronological order to go with my CV, and another is treatment and skill based. Is there any preferred method to present a portfolio?
I don't want to keep jumping in on these, so sorry that it's me again. But from my point of view, I think it's skills and treatment based. I think having it in chronological order is probably useful for yourself, for your own tracking, but you need to be, like Loredana was saying, targeting your audience, and whatever the particular job is, pick out the projects that show the skills that are particularly relevant and put that together.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got another question. So a lot of advice I've seen online makes it seem like portfolio content for each project should be contained on one page, for example, like a PDF. Is this more or less correct, or is it okay to take a couple of pages to fully describe a project?
Can I jump on this? I desperately tried all the time to fit in one page. I think some projects are so extensive and the picture should be quite big, and the details you want to provide, even if you want to keep them small. Sometimes at the maximum I try to keep it 2 pages where, because you don't want to overcrowd a page, and you also don't want to not show something that is very relevant to the project. So perhaps you can just focus the main page with the before and after and some main information, before and after treatment, and then a second page can be useful for additional information during the treatment or research project associated relevant to the particular, or some analysis or some investigation or some additional information. But I've tried, and I do struggle to keep all in one page, even if I would, my gut feeling would be, yeah, 1 page, 1 project, but I second people think like it's very hard to keep that consistent. So try to keep the first page, like consistency through the portfolio. First page, main project. I can, a reviewer might understand your ethical approach and the project background by looking at the first page and the before and after, so I can have a comparison of what has been done. But an additional page, if required, I think would be fine.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that, and writing less is a lot harder, and it takes a lot more time. And if any of you have written preprints for conferences, you're only limited to like 8 or 10 photos, which to me as a conservator drives me crazy. But it's kind of the same sort of thing. You have to think about what you need to show and say to communicate in a very short period of time.
Yeah, and remember to kind of go easy on yourself. You're not expected to be writing an entire report of that project on the 1 page. It's just about the highlights that you want to communicate, you know, at interview. So you don't have to get every last detail in there.
That's some really great points there. Definitely hard to like condense everything down. Next question is, how far back would you suggest one goes in their portfolio? So for example, I've worked as a conservator for 12 years. So should my portfolio reflect my development as a conservator during that time? Or should I display more up-to-date projects, or a bit both?
I think just based on like at interview, if all your projects were 12 years old, we would be wondering what you'd been doing recently and why you hadn't put it in there. So I would put in a good spread, but there's nothing wrong with using an old project if again it shows something particularly innovative or something you're just really proud of. That's not a problem, but you would expect to see some recent work in there. I would draw the line. If you've been working for 12 years, I wouldn't put in anything from your student or internship days. I think you can probably leave that behind. That's just my opinion. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And sometimes a previous project could be interesting to show how would you now approach it differently, and what you have learned, like the learned lessons from the particular project, if it's still of show some qualities, but you know, you may use that to say, oh, you have been in your progression, in your development, you have learned about these other materials that would you like to try. So they could also showcase your progression development in the field and your continuous development, so you are still in deepening your understanding of material, keep yourself informed, and that could be an additional point you might want to showcase.
Okay, this one is about, so I'd be interested in hearing thoughts about how to best express work which focuses on long-term relationships and teaching, advice or consultancy, rather than discrete projects which have endpoints. So how best to showcase those kind of things?
That's a really good question. And I'm in the position where I do have long-term relationships with my clients. By then I don't have to sell them on who I am. They've come back to me. So I'm not sure how to do that, other than in my, I have a CV, and then I have a project list, and my project list is divided by the different kinds of work that I do. And if it's ongoing, I'll just say it's ongoing, and I'll say from when. And then if someone wants to ask me about it, then we can talk about it. It's probably not a great answer, but that's me.
That's a very good question, and I was thinking maybe if it's on the back of something that Sue said about relationship with prior client, maybe it could be a good idea to ask for feedback, to kind of a review, like TripAdvisor. I ask to write a few to the client, to the institution, if you are working with a particular institution, to write some reviews about this long-term relationship and the positive points that you can show for. Well, perhaps that could be something you can do.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really good point about sort of getting reviews that you can use. The next question I think is a really good question. Is it advisable to include projects where something went wrong if you can then talk about what went wrong and how you would do it differently, or is this a risk?
I'm gonna jump on that one straight away. I love it when people bring me projects where something has gone wrong. I love it when they have the confidence to do that. But it is crucial that you are able to talk about what you learned from it, obviously.
I totally agree. And my favorite thing of the last EAC meetings is the mistakes and what people got from it. I think it's fabulous because it doo-doo happens, right? It's part of our lives. So yeah.
Every conservator can tell you about the first object they broke, and that is what makes you.
Yeah. And if it never happened to you, you're either really, really lucky or you're a little person who lives with the truth. So
you're lying. Yeah, totally agree. I think especially because conservation is such a fast-pacing development, we learn all the time. There isn't a very huge research investment in this field, so we learn all the time from other disciplines. So we are growing, we are learning, we make mistakes, and there are more and more conferences now, likely, on this proper topic, learning from failure and mistakes, and we should be talking more and about those, because that is where we are learning, I think, the most. So I would, as Dana said, I would appreciate people being confident to talk about failures and things they would do differently, but they will need to defend and to discuss how and why and what. Sometimes it's still there are still ongoing doubts and questions, and sometimes it's good to talk about it as well. But being able to confront and to discuss on this topic, I think, shows very important skills.
I have a question for those of you who interview people, and do you ask them that question? Do you ask if they had, like, what was your worst conservation nightmare? Or is that something that you don't ask? I mean,
I have asked in the past quite a few times, but I've given it a break recently because a few people panicked a little bit and turned a bit red, and we don't like to stress people out either.
No.
Thank you. That was a really reassuring thing to hear about, mistakes are part of life as a conservator, I guess. So embrace them. The next one is like a practical question. How long should a portfolio be? How many projects to include, and how much is just too much?
Interestingly, I noticed with applications in the last 3 or 4 years, some museums will ask for a portfolio, but they'll ask for it to be really specific, like 3 projects only, which in some ways I think is better, because when you're trying to show yourself off, you try and cram in as much as possible, and sometimes it's really not relevant, especially to that particular role. So I would personally say no more than 10 pages if you can do it, and that might be a bit too much because they're not going to have time to flick through the whole thing. So pick your very best and try and be succinct, in my personal opinion. The other guys might feel differently.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. I thought I would always bring some backup. So I did attend an interview once where the employer asked for 5 projects to focus on archaeological conservation. So I picked my 5 best archaeological projects, and I didn't get the job. They told me in my feedback that I was in the last 2, but that the other person presented a more varied portfolio. So I was really gutted by that. But ever since that point, I have always taken extra backup projects. And then I think you can kind of judge the room on the day as to which ones you're going to go with. Maybe take some hints with the kind of questions they're asking you at interview as well, and just kind of, yeah, go with your gut on the day. We try to give people a time limit now rather than a number of projects. We say you're going to have 10 minutes to talk about your portfolio or whatever.
Yeah, I think be prepared to go with a selected number of projects that are relevant to that particular role, to the particular institution. But I would go with, personally, I've always gone with the big folder, and as well the table of contents will help because you know where to pick, and I've got little labels here that go through, so I'm able to, depending on the audience, to go and pick what I want to show. And the same you can do with the iPad. You can have single folders for all the projects, and when you are asked about what project you want to talk about, and say, oh, I've got so many, I don't know what to start. That would be not a good team. But I think just be ready to go with your focus projects, the one that you're more proud of and would align to your skills, or some particular skills you want to show in detail. But personally, I would go with the whole team and be able to just say, yeah, I've been working so much, I've got so many projects, and I want to show you this one. I think that's the winning. And as Morgan said, like now most application will require you to send only a selected for the pre-interview, only a selected number of projects. And even if you are not asked, I would advise against sending your whole portfolio in the pre-interview. But for the interview, I would go prepared with everything, but an idea of selection that I want to be ready for, and not just mess with. I don't know what it is, just being prepared, but bring down.
I would also add, because I have a print portfolio as well, I agree with the recommendation of colored tabs, but I would just say that even though you might not plan on presenting one of those, make sure you're refreshed about all of that content in case they're flipping through and ask you about something else. You don't want to be like, oh my gosh, that was 5 years ago and I don't remember. So just be prepared to talk about anything you take with you, even if it's not necessarily the 3 things you're planning to present.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And if you are including things like technical reports, articles, and the audience isn't technical, make sure you can give them the 2 or 3 minute explanation of what it was all about, because they may be overwhelmed, and that's not, you don't want to put them in that kind of position.
Great points there. Really, really good points. Next question. So this is from the employee perspective. I've seen portfolios used quite badly during the interview. It is also difficult as an interviewer to read and listen at the same time, so I would advise not to put too much text in a portfolio. What are your thoughts about effective use of either a physical or a digital portfolio at interview?
I have seen people use them very badly as well, but it tends to be when people kind of get bogged down in the detail. I think it's very effective if you can produce some images for something you're already talking about. But I think that comment is perfectly right. You can't bank on the interviewer being able to read as well. I think as an interviewer, if I see something in your portfolio that I want you to talk more about, I'm going to ask about it. So yeah, just try not to get carried away by talking through too much of the text or detail, I think. I've never actually seen anybody use a digital portfolio inside an interview. I've only ever been sent them separately. I don't know if anybody else has seen that.
Yeah, I've seen digital portfolio, people come in with the iPads, and I've done as well. Sometimes when I've tried to apply elsewhere, just bringing the iPad, and it's very wonderful because you can zoom in and being very efficient. But you can again need to know a little bit the audience, because people might be, or you can ask before and if that would be appropriate to bring up digital portfolio, or you can edit partly print off or ready to be print off by a link on Dropbox. I think there are, as I tried to explain before, there are lots of advantages on using a digital format. I mean, this is digital before being printed out. It's not. But I think more we graduate, the more the graduate will be graduating from school, the more I think they will be technical, advanced, and able to make the best use of digital portfolios. And I think also interviewers will be more accustomed to receive that during an interview. But I think we are still on a stage where we might want to ask if that would be appropriate before attending the interview, maybe, unless it's specifically required one or the other.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing is you should find out how big the interview panel is going to be, because a tiny little iPad, if there's 5 people on the panel or 4 people, they won't be able to see it. So I guess if you're thinking of that, maybe it's more like a PowerPoint presentation than an iPad.
Okay, thank you very much for that. The next one is kind of related, I suppose. It's about, so any online resources, where might you find good resources for seeing example portfolios?
Example portfolios, because of the copyright issue, there will be mainly websites, but you will need to ask for passwords. So you might find brief, kind of only a few pictures in the main website of conservators, but you might need to ask for password and permission. You might have someone always willing to give that to you. That won't be already available, unfortunately. You may see like designers, kind of similar. If you want to have an idea of how a website, a platform would work or would present itself, rather than the other, like all the website I was talking about before. So if you want to know how one work more than other, you can go in their web page and see that. But to see actual portfolios, conservation portfolios, because of the copyright issue, might not be something that you will easily find.
I believe.
Oh, go Steve.
Thank you. I believe IIC did was it a webinar or whatever about effective posters, conference posters. And although it's not a portfolio, it's the same, a lot of the same skills, just distilling everything down. And I thought it was excellent.
I think if you're a little bit stuck or want some feedback or to compare, one of the easiest things to do is speak to friends. See if you can get a group together and swap portfolios. The nice thing about friends is, generally speaking, if there's something they really don't like, they're probably going to be quite honest with you. So you get really good feedback on what's working and what's not.
I'd also say I've asked a lot of friends or colleagues about their portfolios, and I've said, would you mind if I had a look, just to give you an idea of what you include. And over the years of having looked at lots and lots of portfolios, because people have been really kind and let me look, because I'm nosy, I want to know. But I found out what I like and what I don't like, and it's helped me put a page together. So it can be a bit overwhelming, I think, when you're going, oh, I need to do a layout, I need to find the text size, I need to choose the images. But I think when you boil it down into its component parts and you find what you like having looked at loads of examples, just stick to it and try and replicate it, and it will help when you add pages. But that's one of my tips that's helped me. So
Really,
oh, sorry.
sorry, Rebecca, I was going to say a really twee thing to do is if you have a look on Pinterest and you put in something like brochures or something like that, there's normally lots of different layouts, and it's definitely a good place for inspiration where you can go, oh, I like that, or I don't like that, and then kind of incorporate that into making your own signature style.
That's a really good point. Yeah, so online is really good, like even on social media, people sometimes share things there. But yeah, if you know people or they've got their own website, ask them about it, see if they mind sharing it with you. I'm going to combine the next question with the second question here. So it's about preferred size to print your portfolio in, or whether things should be printed double or single-sided. Is there a preference?
Kind of a matter of taste in a lot of ways, isn't it? But my own portfolio, I print it A3, and I do print things single-sided, but I double it up so that I can show a giant spread altogether. But I just print them single-sided so that they're easy to separate and move around. That's all.
Okay, thank you. The next one. So given the risk of HR procedures anonymizing everything and stripping out identifying information, how do you decide which information goes in your CV, which goes in your personal statement, and which in your portfolio without duplicating the information in every single item?
Sorry.
No, so please do go.
Okay. No, I think it's a really good question. And my husband works for the provincial government, so I watch him go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes. And I don't know if they do this in Europe, but certainly North America, they often, that will be jobbed out and it will go through a computer program. So learning the words to put in your cover letter so that you get pulled away and pulled to the side, the good side, is an important skill to develop, because they won't even, if you don't make that cut, you're done.
That's a very insightful information. I think that's very important to know. I think they do something here as well in some museum. They will have a computer reading the applications before, so you need kind of to address some particular topics. So I'm told in some museums they do that. But yeah, as well, I think resume or CVs, they need to just quote the information. It doesn't matter if they would replicate your personal statement. A personal statement has to address the skills you have in relationship to the application you're submitting. So that has to be, and usually has got only a certain amount of words. You have got only a certain amount of words, so make good use of that. But I would not worry about repeating yourself from a CV, because of course, or a resume, because a resume has got a standard layout, and you need to put those information. You need to be synthetic, but provide dates, provide names, supervisor or managers or job role, the kind of standard information. And your especially in a CV, you need to address your main role within that department or that job. So it's kind of a standard thing, and you need to do that. But on a presentation, a personal statement, or letter of interest, that's kind of, that is where your skill of containing, of enlarging your expertise to meet the job role requirements. That is another thing. I would keep them separate. If they, in some parts, they might repeat themselves just because you address some important experiences. That should be totally fine.
Yeah, I think the really important thing there, what you've said, Loredana, is that the CV is basically just a bold statement of fact. I worked here for 5 years in this role, but the letter has to say why that experience is relevant to the job you're applying for. So you don't have to write in your letter, I worked here for 5 years in this role, because you should really be saying, when I worked there, I did this, and this is why this makes me better at this job.
Just following on from that, so in the HR process where they try and anonymize things, they'll remove like contact details and names and stuff, but generally speaking, you'll get the CV and the matching personal statement that goes with it together. So it's not like they've been completely separated. So I'll be able to read through, I'll be able to see on the CV, say you worked at the V&A, and then you can refer back to that, as Diana was saying, in the cover letter. I wouldn't expect to see, I worked at the V&A between this date and this date in your cover letter. You don't have to be that specific, because you can already see that information on the CV. Like, don't worry that they're going to be completely separate, that you will still get them together.
Okay, thank you. The next question is a pandemic related question. So many of us have been affected by the pandemic and do not have any projects to showcase from the last year and a half. Is there something we should think of to resonate this gap in our portfolio?
I think the one good thing, is it a good thing? It's not a good thing, but the pandemic was global, so everybody's in the same boat. So I wouldn't judge anybody on a gap in their portfolio from the last 18 months. I don't think you need to worry too much about that. But it would be a bonus if you could put in anything that you did manage to do in that time, you know, even if it's attending EPN group talks, you know, just so that you're kind of keeping up your CPD wherever possible. I think that's all a bonus.
Completely second what Diana said. Yeah. Connect. It's a pandemic, so everyone experienced it the same. Just make sure you keep yourself updated, because there have been lots of talks, and has been kind of thriving the online conservation community, apart from the first months when we were all wondering what's going on. But yeah, if you can show you've made use of the time to develop yourself, even artistic skills or anything that kept you somehow attached to the conservation field or the art field, or you have been keeping, you have not just watching TV. Just make sure there is evidence in your CV or in whatever part, or during your interview process, there is an evidence that you've been using the time wisely. I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know about the rest of the panels, but I've never watched so many webinars in my entire life. And I found there's actually a nice sense of solidarity that we were there as a group and sharing the information on our experiences. So yeah, I would definitely not chastise somebody for not doing anything when they're locked at home. But it's how you use the time, I think, is an important thing.
This is sort of related, but would you like to see, so not just conservation work, but maybe like hobbies or interests, like sewing or whatever you do, makery wise, anything, is that a good thing to include?
Yeah, I think anything that like that is fine, as long as you take the step of explaining how it relates to conservation skills in some way. So sewing has obvious you know, benefits, especially in textile stuff or objects. So I would just say, if you're putting in hobbies, just always make the link. But again, like, just to reiterate, I think that everybody's situation is different, and not everybody has gonna have been in the position where they're able to use the lockdown time exactly the way they might have wanted. So if there was just an 18-month gap, I still wouldn't ask any questions.
I will just add that I think the North American graduate programs created a resource, and of course it's for students, but it's things that, you know, if you're applying to graduate school, what you could do from home, and a lot of it is, you know, building hand skills. If I can find that resource, I'll put it in the chat, because I think it's applicable to people at any stage when they're stuck at home during a pandemic.
That would be great if you could find the link, or we'll email it afterwards. That would be fantastic. We've got about 10 minutes left.
Can I just go back to other
Yeah,
skills and hobbies? Like, really make sure, as Diana was saying, like link them to conservation, but also, even if it's a tenuous link, please make sure they're relevant, because I have had some very interesting CVs talking about people's karaoke hobbies and things like that, and I'm like, well, it sounds like it'd be quite fun in the lab, but I don't really see how it's going to help. So make sure you really think about whether it's relevant before you put it in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an amazing example. So the next question, you've talked a lot about having too many projects to show on your portfolio, or too much to show, but can you touch on the opposite? What if you just don't have that much experience yet, or it's concentrated in one area?
That's not a problem either. I mean, you're going to know if somebody's at the start of their career anyway. You're not going to expect them to have too much in their portfolio. I think it's all about what you make of the project you've got. So, you know, just try to highlight things that you've learned from them. And if you think you're really struggling for content, I would be very happy to see a spread at the end that talked about your kind of career goals and things that you want to develop in, even if it's work you haven't done yet. Just kind of set down your aspirations for me so that I can kind of see you're quite a well-rounded person, you know where you're going in the world. That's just as impressive as having sorry, I think I muted myself.
Okay, great. Next question is it preferable to show complex problem solving on lesser known or lower value works of art, or simple treatments on famous or high value works of art? Does the cultural value of an object affect the perception of the applicant's skills?
I would say a big no, because as a conservator, generally speaking, I try not to ever think about the value of an object, because it doesn't matter. I mean, something which costs 5 million or something which cost a fiver, it's still got, I should still be treating it the same. So try and display an object where you've had more skills or more problem solving, because we'll get more of an idea of your thought pattern and things like that. You can see so much more from that, rather than just, oh, they've worked on a very expensive object.
Yeah, I think that kind of links back to what we said right at the start. Is just be careful with your hero images, and it can be very eye-catching and very impressive. So sure, I mean, if you've worked on a lot of famous stuff, maybe throw one in, but I wouldn't make it the focus of your portfolio. We're looking more for the skills and the problem solving, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with Morgan. I mean, ethically, any object we should be treating as equal. I mean, if we're part of a curatorial team, then curation can make those decisions. And I'm often in the position as a person in private practice where there is nobody to play the curatorial role, which is probably a topic for another discussion. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a Rembrandt or something you got from the dollar store, whatever. If it's yours to care for, that's your job.
Yeah, great point. So I think we've got time for one or two more questions. I think there was one in the chat about regarding permission to share images. Could you please explain how it works in the UK? For example, do I need written permissions? Which are the legislations to follow?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and that's like I try to do some research on it, but it's not quite so easy. In the UK, the copyright law at the moment is from 1988. I think, if I'm not, it's the Copyright Design and Patents Act, and I couldn't find much information shared by ICON, as well as I was saying during the workshop, and I think that would be very useful. There was only little paragraph I share with you from the ICON Professional Standard Judgment and Ethics from 2020 that discuss intellectual property, but very briefly, where they acknowledge the need for archiving, so conservators should keep photographic documentation. Is very important for us to document what we do in writing and with pictorial documentation. So to keep thorough documentation is very highly important, but also respecting the confidential nature of this information. From my experience working in private practice, what you need to, if you want to share pictures on an online platform, you will need to ask for permission. You don't have the rights to share anything. And working for private practice, in the private practice, most of the time will entail working for collectors or with auction houses, and most certainly you won't be given, sadly, the go ahead to share this information, because of course these objects will and artworks are considered to be next again in the market sometimes, so they feel like they would diminish the value. For in the museum or public institution, most of those will have departments like the curatorial departments or people dedicated to release copyrights permission on objects. But again, you will need to ask, to email them or ask for permission, and then you will be given the okay to share these images with the copyright and the information that they want, the capture that they want you to share. So yeah, I think in our field, a discussion in the UK about how we can work on this issue, because I understand that sometimes I've been working on very amazing projects and artwork for auction houses, for Sotheby's Christie's, with very intriguing and challenging project, but I haven't been able to share on websites or on public presentation like this. And I think in our field it can be quite an issue. You can show just details of part of the treatment, but without referencing what the object is. You can talk about the material, but you might not be, unless you are given permission, you cannot address who the artist or what the object or the owner of the object is. So that's a bit unfortunate.
Okay, yeah, it's quite complicated, I guess, all those things. But thank you for your answer. I think we're about at time now. So any questions that we haven't been able to answer, we can download from the chat and we'll forward them to the panel, if that's okay. But thank you so much. That's been really engaging. Loads of different varied questions and lots of really good answers to some interesting topics. So thank you very much for your time and your brains. Pick your brains a lot over this past hour, so we really appreciate it.